English is a complex language. There are many interesting rules and words. Where did these rules and words come from? Today, I want to explore some history on the origins of English. The origins of English are from Old German. This is around 500 BC to 500 AD. Many Proto-Germanic words make the basis of English. For example, the word blood comes from the Old German Blotha and became Blut in German. Sunon gave English sun and German Sonne. Meno gave English moon and German Mond. Wator gave English water and German Wasser. This language was spoken by Germanic raiders who invaded Roman Britain. The biggest German tribes were the Angles, Saxons, and Jutes. So, this earliest English is often called Anglo-Saxon. This Germanic language was the starting place of English. So I want you to notice how all the foundational words in English are Germanic. The most core vocabulary in English will be like ancient German. However, Germans would not be the only invaders. As such, the language would soon be influenced by other forces. In the 800s, Vikings began invading the British Isles. Their influence was felt from 800 AD to 1100 AD. These Vikings from Norway and Denmark spoke Old Norse. Their language wasn't so different from Old English, so the languages mixed. Norse had simpler verbs and pronouns, so English adopted them. In English, the words they, them, and their came from Old Norse. Also, many simple verbs were taken. For example, get is from yeta, take is from taka, call is from kala, and die is from deya. Some other common words are sky from ski, window is from vindauga, knife is from knifer, and egg is from egg. It hasn't changed in over 1,000 years, which is impressive in English. We also have some words that the Vikings would find useful. Burn comes from the Norse brenna, gore comes from gore, skull comes from skalli, ransack comes from ransaka. A theme I want you to notice is how pragmatic these changes are. Norse helped simplify English. However, it is also a big reason why English has a strict subject, verb, object organization. Also, many brutal and violent words were introduced from the Vikings. But this is not the last time Vikings would influence English. These Vikings, from 800 to 1000 AD, were from Norway and Denmark. However, in 1066, some descendants of Vikings would also leave their mark. The Normans were an interesting group. They were like Vikings, but they were also heavily influenced by the French language. They spoke a hybrid of Norman French. When William the Conqueror established rule in 1066, many changes were in store. This would continue until about 1300. These new conquerors made their hierarchy clear. Natives to Britain spoke English, and they spoke Norman French. As such, many new words were introduced, but with an interesting nuance. Many of these words took on a royal, official meaning. So English developed an interesting split. Words that were for commoners and words that were for the wealthy conquerors. Let's look at some examples. Commoners of England said start, but the wealthy now said commence. Commoners said end, but rich people said terminate. Common people work, but rich people labor. Commoners eat, but rich people dine. You can see the language became split between the rich and the poor, the conquered and the conquerors. This is still important in English today. Fancy, high-class words always seem to have French origins. However, they also come with a sense of foreignness. They don't hold the same deep, unambiguous meaning as the original Anglo-Saxon words. If you want to know something, you ask. However, if it's a bureaucratic question, you inquire. The Old English is simple, strong, and direct. The Norman French words are fancy, high class, and have a feeling of self-importance. You can still hear this in modern English, and in America you can see the influence. We help military allies. For other countries, we give foreign aid. Help is Anglo-Saxon. It's blunt and clear. Aid is Norman French. It's fancy, but pretentious and insincere. Another example is, Japan builds a destroyer, compared to China constructs a destroyer. For Japan, it is simple and direct, an equal word. This word we use for a friend. For China, it is foreign and pretentious. This is a word we use for a stranger. Now, this isn't exclusive. Often you'll see China builds too. However, the nuance still exists, and with China, we tend to use non-Anglo-Saxon words. Speaking of China, a similar parallel exists in Japanese. There is wago, words that are of pure Japanese origin, and then there is Kongo, words that are borrowed from classical Chinese. For example, miru versus kansatsu, gohan versus shokuji, kimochi versus kanjo. This parallel isn't perfect. Kongo were not forced on Japan the same way Norman words were forced into English, but it's still interesting. However, there is something that we're overlooking. If German, Norse, and French are so influential, why does English still seem so different? Well, there is one big influence we have to talk about. It was pushed a little bit by the Norman French language. However, this influence runs deep through all of Europe. The Germans gave a foundation to English. The Norse gave powerful, brutal tools for English. The Norman French gave English nobility and logistics. However, there is one language that revolutionized English. This language would give tools for politics, religion, trade, and empire. Since even before the Germans first came to the British Isles, Britain was ruled by Rome. Britain was Roman for over 350 years, from Claudius to Valentinian. You could argue from Caesar till Constantine III, but let's not belabor the point. Over time, Latin, the language of the Romans, flowed throughout Europe, and it influences languages to this day. The Catholic Church is based in Rome, and its influence was felt all over Christendom. Words that English gained through Church Latin are confession from confessio, grace from gratia, spirit from spiritus, sacrifice from sacrificio. There was also a lot of Latin in politics, education, and science. For example, student from studens, republic from res publica, virus from virus. Surprisingly, the Japanese pronunciation is quite close to the original Latin. English often uses the French V sound because many of these words were filtered through France first. This influence goes deeper than just language. The UK models several things on Rome, including the Old Bailey, whose statue is based on Justitia, a Roman goddess. Both the UK and America still use Latin in their legal systems, and they're proud of their heritage. In fact, Japan imported many of Rome's civil framework indirectly from France and Prussia, nowadays Germany. That's just how influential Latin and Rome is. Japanese lawyers today could go back in time and understand roughly what was happening in a Roman court. Lawyers from the UK, Australia, Canada, and America could go back and understand many of the words the Romans used centuries ago in a different language. America takes its heritage to an extreme. Many of its founders used the Roman Republic as a model for their new country. America still has a Senate based on Rems Senatus. It uses Roman imagery. Many of America's most important institutions use symbols of Rome. It gets a bit extreme. America changed the spelling of many words to be more Roman in the 1800s. The UK spells honor, but in America it's honor, to be closer to the Latin root, honor. Same with offense in the UK, but offense in America, to be close to the Latin offensa, with an S. Another famous one is color versus color, to be closer to the Latin color. So, when you look at different spellings in English in the UK and in America, the UK keeps some of the French influence on its language. America intentionally went back to directly connect with the original Latin. But it doesn't just stop at words and spelling. America would invent things they thought were Roman. For example, the Bellamy salute, based on the Roman salute. Now, there's no solid evidence of this salute being used in Rome. The only evidence we have is, dubious. However, it felt Roman, so America wanted to do it. Sadly, a few years later, Europe started their own saluting that looked similar. Once Europe starts doing something, it stops being cool. So America stopped doing the Bellamy salute. One symbol America does maintain in the same regard as Rome is the eagle. This symbol was important in Rome, and it's important in America. The influence of Rome is incredible, all throughout Europe and America, but I can't go into more detail here. This video would never end. There is one last very important language I want to mention, and it's Greek. Greek is very, very important for English scientific expression. Greek influenced English mainly during the Renaissance, but really throughout the 1400s to the 1800s. Greek is delightfully mechanical. For example, if you take tele and phone to make telephone. This PH sound didn't sound like an F until around 300 BC to 300 AD. Whenever you see a funny PH, you can thank the Greeks. Also, you can take bios and logos to get biology. This is the same bio that is in biohazard. However, hazard is from French, so it's not as cool. Or you can take demos and kratos to make democracy. It's a very cool language, and it works well for science and philosophy. Even today, modern English is evolving, but now you know its roots. From Proto-German, it got its foundations. We got words like house, stone, day, king, night, full. From Old Norse, it got new tools for grammar, and some interesting violent words. Egg, knife, ransack, slaughter, hew, hell. From Norman French, English got tools for high society. Sovereign, parliament, prince and princess, beauty, perfume, courage. From Latin, English received tools for law and empire, constitution, library, virtue, valor, defense, lecture. Like I said, it was so influential it gave Japanese some words filtered through English. Data, audio, video, radio. This is great. Like, if you have a circle and from the centers lines radiate out, and this line, it's called a radius. Let's say you move electrons quickly, they will emit radiation, and we can take these signals and, oh, that's right, with a radio, oh my god, it's genius. Last, Greek gave English its scientific and philosophic tools. Physics, atom, prototype, syntax, ethics, politics. Greek is also so influential it made Japanese words. Japanese learns Greek secondhand from English. For example, cosmos, dorama, logic, ero. Very important words. Together, these languages make English special. This rich history is what gives English its incredible flexibility, but also what makes it difficult to learn. So don't stress if it's a challenge. Even native speakers don't know how the language will change